a royal drama of unprecedented proportions is exploding across the Atlantic. Yet, the most deafening aspect of this conflict isn't the noise of the artillery. It is the sudden, chilling silence that has followed the initial barrage. In the wake of what insiders are calling the most aggressive development in London since the original separation, Meghan Markle had fired off a string of pointed, dangerous messages from the United States. She strongly implied that the British royal family was concealing a dark truth, a secret so damaging that she believed holding it over their heads would force them to the negotiating table. She staked everything on a high-stakes, do-or-die media offensive, with Prince Harry fully deployed on the front lines, prepared to confront his own family head-on. But then, something strange happened. The palace corridors in London responded not with panic, but with an eerie, almost glacial silence. No rebuttals were issued, no clarifications were offered. And then, just as quickly as it began, Meghan abruptly vanished from the headlines. Her campaigns ground to a halt as if an invisible hand had simply pulled the plug on the entire operation. To understand why the noise stopped, we must look away from the spotlight of California and into the shadows of St. James's Palace. There, Princess Anne has quietly emerged as the steady guardian of the institution. She is the woman who has never been swayed by glamour, the only one who maintained a cool distance and a skeptical gaze from the moment Meghan first entered the House of Windsor. For Anne, time did not dull suspicion. It merely allowed her to collect the missing pieces. While Meghan was playing checkers with the media, Anne was playing three-dimensional chess with history. The Princess Royal effectively laid bare a reality behind the scenes that was so sharp, so deeply unsettling, and so irrefutable that it forced Meghan into absolute, total silence. This is the story of how the monarchy's quietest operator dismantled a media empire without saying a single public word. At the multi-million-dollar estate in Montecito, California, the atmosphere had been one of calculated defiance. Meghan Markle stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out at the silver-leafed olive trees under the blazing sun. 6 years after the earth-shaking departure of 2020, the former actress had forged a composure so steely it bordered on unnerving. Her media career was sliding into a perilous trough. Lucrative deals with streaming giants had dried up one by one, and the American public was growing weary of the endless loop of victim narratives. Meghan knew that to salvage her standing, she needed a weapon of truly devastating force. The latest campaign she had launched shed the mournful, wounded tone of her historic interview with Oprah Winfrey. This time, she appeared in promotional clips with a razor-sharp, confrontational edge laced with menace. She no longer spoke merely of loneliness. She openly alluded to dark truths. She claimed the British royal family had spent millions of pounds to bury. Her statements about systematic mistreatment and the explosive documents she said she possessed poured out in a relentless stream across social media. She was playing her cards face up, ready to go all the way, turning chaos into a springboard to reclaim the global spotlight. The sheer directness of the assault had spiraled beyond the control of conventional PR firms. Threats to expose state secrets and intimate royal inner workings began setting off alarm bells in diplomatic channels between Britain and the United States. There was genuine fear that one individual's words could ignite a serious political incident. Yet Meghan, intoxicated by the glare of attention, appeared to have stopped caring about those diplomatic boundaries. She believed the monarchy was too afraid of scandal to fight back. She forgot one crucial variable. Princess Anne does not fear scandal. She fears nothing. Meanwhile, in London, amid the hushed, almost arid atmosphere of St. James's Palace, Princess Anne sat before a thick dossier. She was entering the mindset of a fortress defender at war. Her keen eyes scanned the summary of Meghan's most recent statements from across the Atlantic. She showed no flash of anger or shock. In her 70s now, with decades of steering charities through storms and navigating countless crises, Anne recognized the scent of manipulation. She thought back to the early days when inconsistencies in Meghan's accounts of her past and her family had been smothered by the press's blind adoration and Harry's devotion. Back then, out of a desire to preserve harmony and honor her mother's legacy, she had chosen to watch from afar. But this latest move, openly attempting to extort the family with fabricated dark truths, had finally crossed her line. Anne set the report down, her slender yet commanding hands folding together. She understood that Meghan was weaponizing the very tolerance of the royal family against them. For Anne, the survival of the institution and the honor of the bloodline outweighed any personal tie. The media storm roaring out of California was powerful, but it slammed against an immovable stone wall in London. Anne had no need for tabloid noise to strike back. She rose and walked to the desk where a specially encrypted phone waited. In her mind, the plan to stop Meghan was not a televised shouting match, but a root and branch re-examination of everything that had been overlooked. She spoke quietly to the aides standing at attention, her voice calm yet as cold as Scottish frost. She declared that this time it had gone beyond family bounds, and what was built on falsehood should be ended with truth. In a space thick with the scent of old paper and candle wax, Princess Anne sat motionless, her eyes pinned to faded photographs spread across the desk. They were images from 2018, capturing the moment Meghan Markle first appeared officially at Harry's side. Back then, the whole world had been intoxicated by a modern fairy tale. But Anne, with the instincts of someone trained to see through every layer of artifice, had sensed a subtle discord from the very first handshakes. The intuition of a woman who had devoted her entire life to the service of the crown told her that Meghan's confidence did not spring from noble self-assurance, but from a carefully scripted performance. Anne recalled those brief conversations in the past, when she had noticed how Meghan would subtly shift small details of her biography, sometimes portraying herself as a hardworking, self-made girl who rose through sheer grit, other times as an internationally significant social activist since her teenage years. Those tiny fragments, though minor, had never quite fitted together perfectly in Anne's razor-sharp memory. She lifted a dust-covered dossier labeled confidential that had lain untouched for years. These were the initial background checks compiled when Meghan was preparing to enter the House of Windsor. At the time, amid the euphoria, Harry's fierce protectiveness, and intense media pressure to modernize the monarchy's image, those red flags had been hastily glossed over. Details about her social connections in Canada and the mysterious financial backing for personal image-building campaigns before she met Harry had all been neatly filed away under the heading of privacy. A cold current ran down Anne's spine as she realized how much the family had indulged. For her, activating this investigation was not the petty retaliation of a stern aunt-in-law. It was an act of redemption toward her duty to safeguard the crown. She understood perfectly that once Meghan had gone public with threats of dark truths, the only way to disarm that weapon was to seize control of the truth before American media could shape and distort it. Anne's actions were swift and decisive. She did not call a full council meeting that might risk leaks from Harry's inner circle. Instead, she quietly ordered the reactivation of every internal security channel and the engagement of independent vetting experts. Her hands moved across the pages, marking names, dates, and media organizations whose true ownership had never been properly clarified. In that moment, Anne's mind was a fusion of lethal calm and faint, belated regret. She now saw clearly that Meghan Markle was not merely an actress chasing fame. She was a master chess player who had exploited the system's softness to lay the foundation stones of her own personal empire. Every past move changing publicists, approaching charitable funds now appeared in Anne's mind as premeditated steps on a long board. Under the dim golden lamplight, Anne signed the order for a comprehensive review. She no longer viewed this as an everyday family clash of oversized egos. Deep down, she had shifted into the mindset of a general. The atmosphere inside the office of Princess Anne's special advisory team subsequently thickened with intense concentration. Scanners hummed without pause, converting thousands of pages of paper documents from the royal archives into digital format to begin a full-scale dissection of information. Fragments long thought buried by time, dating back to 2017 when Meghan was still a fresh name on Kensington Palace's guest list, were being exhumed and examined with unprecedented scrutiny. The analysts started noticing the first anomalies in the old background reports. Strange gaps appeared in Meghan's pre-engagement schedule, unexplained trips, and the sudden emergence of unfamiliar American media consulting entities that at the time had simply been dismissed as her personal support team now took on a sinister light. Viewed through today's lens, however, those entities revealed themselves as quiet architects laying the groundwork for rebellion, and received updates revealing how many standard vetting procedures had been bypassed or conducted superficially, thanks to subtle interventions from external lobbying groups that had cleverly reframed security checks as issues of discrimination, forcing royal staff to back down. At the same time, the investigation's reach extended silently across the Atlantic. Through discrete channels to independent auditing units in the United States, a tangled web of Meghan's connections began to surface. Untraceable money flows came into focus. These were not mere acting residuals, but contributions from anonymous funds routed through multiple layers of intermediaries before landing with the public relations firms shaping her image. Anne felt a wave of revulsion as she examined the classic influence trading contracts. In exchange for lavish praise and ironclad protection from major outlets, Meghan fed them carefully curated drips of insider information, always strategically timed. The escalation of the probe led to a breakthrough discovery. Disjointed records of travel and clandestine meetings with reality television producers, even while she was still fulfilling royal duties in London, suddenly snapped together into a merciless chain of logic. The family conflicts, the on-camera tears, and the complaints about suffocating protocol were not spontaneous outbursts from a wounded woman. They had been meticulously engineered plot points in a long-running script. Each scandal was calibrated to boost personal brand value. The mood among the investigators shifted from cautious to stunned. They realized they were not dealing with a rebellious daughter-in-law, but with a years-in-the-making soft power takeover operation that had predated Megxit by a long margin. Meghan had not entered the royal family to serve. She had entered to acquire the world's most powerful calling card, then turned it against the very institution that issued it. Every truth she now threatened to reveal was material she had stockpiled and shaped over time, waiting for the moment of maximum market value. In London, Princess Anne stared at the flowchart of money trails and relationships projected on the electronic board. Her silence carried the weight of a verdict. She could see exactly how Meghan had exploited the system's naivety to plant media time bombs. Her patience finally ran dry when she understood that while the royal family had tried to shield Meghan from press intrusion, she herself had been the one supplying fuel to those very fires. The final piece slotted into place with the discovery of a covert agreement between Meghan and a major American media conglomerate signed just months after the royal wedding, promising exclusive content about life inside the palace. This was ironclad proof that the betrayal had not been the result of a fracture. It had been the intention from the beginning. The forgotten fragments had now formed a complete picture of calculation, and Anne knew she held the means to extinguish every last spark of the false glamour emanating from the woman across the ocean. While the deep, silent undercurrents of Princess Anne's investigation were quietly tightening their noose, Harry was living in an entirely different reality in California. He stood at the very front of the media war, willingly turning himself into the strongest, most steadfast shield protecting Meghan. To Harry, every critical voice from London, every analytical article pointing out the strangeness in his wife's behavior was interpreted as a brand new witch hunt, a cruel historical rerun of the persecution his mother once endured. Harry's state of mind at this moment was a volatile mixture of extreme loyalty and a vague, gnawing fear of abandonment. He no longer viewed the world through the lens of a prince. He saw it through the eyes of a soldier dug into a trench, determined to hold the line. Every time Meghan appeared with a troubled expression or tears streaming down her face after a filming session, a surge of rage would ignite inside him. He believed with absolute, unquestioning faith every word she spoke. He was convinced she was the victim of an archaic feudal system now trying to crush their freedom. He had no idea that those very emotions of his were being used by Meghan as the perfect catalyst, lending devastating credibility to every attack campaign. Harry threw himself into the media counteroffensive with a tragic, feverish intensity. He sat for interviews, tirelessly repeating the same points about injustice, discrimination, and psychological suffering. Every statement he made carried a sharp, bitter edge aimed directly at the family he once called home. He did not realize that while he was desperately trying to defend his wife's truth, he himself was providing the most vivid living proof that this rift was beyond repair. Every action he took, from denouncing royal protocol to openly endorsing Meghan's claims about dark truths, was being meticulously documented and filed away by Anne's team. Inside the lavish villa, Harry would often spend hours obsessively tracking social media developments, worrying far more about Meghan's image than his own. He became completely disconnected from reality in London, treating every attempt at contact from his family as a cleverly disguised trap. This blindness prevented him from noticing the shift in Meghan's own behavior. As the pressure from the quiet investigation began to create cracks in her plan, Meghan grew increasingly volatile, constantly pushing Harry to speak out more forcefully, more defiantly. And Harry, driven by love and the crushing guilt of a husband, blindly kept walking further down that path of self-destruction. The deepest tragedy of Harry's psychology lay in this. He genuinely believed he was fighting for justice, while in reality, he was merely a pawn on a chessboard that his own wife had been arranging for years. He never once suspected the shadowy money trails or the media deals that Anne had uncovered. To him, Meghan remained a pure, persecuted angel backed into a corner. The gulf between Harry's perception and the harsh reality Anne now held in her hands grew wider by the day, creating an abyss that no apology, however heartfelt, could ever hope to bridge. In London, watching the video clips of Harry passionately denouncing the royal family on American television, Princess Anne gave only the slightest shake of her head. A fleeting shadow of sadness passed through her normally steely eyes. In her nephew, she saw the most extreme form of exploited innocence. He did not understand that every word he spoke, every gesture he made in Meghan's defense was being carefully archived, recorded as textbook evidence of masterful psychological manipulation. Anne felt a profound, quiet pity for Harry, the soldier fighting so fiercely in a battle he had already lost before it even began. The atmosphere inside the confidential room, deep within Buckingham Palace, carried a solemnity so heavy it felt suffocating. This was the place where the crown's most consequential decisions were made in absolute silence, far removed from flashbulbs and media scrutiny. Princess Anne stood at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, her presence radiating the cold authority of a presiding judge. There were no flowers on the table, no steaming cups of tea in accordance with usual protocol. Instead, a modern projector stood ready, and several stacks of tightly sealed documents waited in neat rows. The meeting unfolded in oppressive quiet. Once the most powerful figures from the royal household office and the senior legal advisors had taken their seats, Anne began her presentation. She did not open with emotional accusations or wounded pride. Instead, she let numbers and data speak first. The initial images that appeared on the screen were intricate flowcharts of money moving from shell companies in Delaware and the Cayman Islands, routed through charitable organizations, before ultimately landing in payment accounts tied to Meghan's media campaigns in California. One by one, Anne dissected each detail with merciless precision. She displayed contracts signed under pseudonyms and secret agreements with data harvesting firms designed to manipulate social media algorithms and manufacture waves of artificial support. The mood in the room shifted from guarded skepticism to profound shock. Those present realized that what Meghan had framed as her personal voice was, in fact, the carefully engineered output of an industrial machine fueled by money and political calculation. Evidence surfaced of covert recordings she had made of private palace conversations as early as 2019, and of deliberately orchestrated leaks timed to paint Harry as the enemy of his own family. All were laid out plainly on the table. Anne's delivery was unflinching. She used a pointer to trace the eerie coincidences between dates of painful family events and the launches of Meghan's image-building offensives. She turned page after page of old dossiers on Meghan's life in America and Canada, biographies that had been meticulously scrubbed clean before the marriage, now revealing glaring contradictions and shadowy networks of mutual interest. The deception was not exposed through shouting, but through the irrefutable logic of every piece finally falling into its rightful place. In the sealed room, the projector's light cast harsh shadows across Anne's austere yet resolute face. She sought no emotional consensus. She was presenting an irreversible reality. Those in attendance watched the collapse of a self-constructed icon. They saw how the royal family's tolerance had been exploited as raw material for a profit-driven drama. The silence that filled the space was not an absence of sound. It was the silence of truth when it is too brutal to be spoken aloud. Anne concluded by placing one final dossier before them, proof of a long-term plan. Meghan had drafted aimed at eventual divorce and the construction of a political empire in the United States, built on the brand of survivor of her war against the monarchy. It was the killing blow. Every romantic notion of a woman fighting for love and freedom dissolved, leaving only the portrait of a calculating opportunist determined to drain every last drop of value from a 1,000-year institution. Princess Anne gathered the documents with slow, deliberate movements that carried terrifying force. She required no formal verdict. The mere existence of this evidence was already a death sentence for Meghan's media career. The meeting ended without a single minute recorded, just as its nature demanded a silent purge. After the closed-door meeting in London, an eerily still atmosphere began to settle over the Montecito estate. No press statements came roaring back from the palace. No fiery counter-arguments erupted across political forums. Yet the British royal family's silence carried a crushing, almost apocalyptic weight, like the dead calm before a cataclysmic flood. Across the ocean, Meghan Markle started to sense a fundamental shift in the very air around her. Calls from major media partners grew sparse. Editors who once chased her now hesitated. And most tellingly, the network of close sources that had always been ready to feed her ammunition suddenly went mute. Meghan's mindset swung from towering confidence to utter disorientation. She had no precise knowledge of what had transpired inside that sealed London room, but the abrupt drying up of financial lifelines and the sudden withdrawal of her carefully cultivated alliances told her that an invisible force had severed every artery feeding her operation. She still held the phone in her hand, fingers hovering over drafts of the next round of attacks. But for the first time in her life, she did not dare press send. Princess Anne's silence was not weakness. It was the presence of a verdict already rendered but not yet pronounced. In the days that followed, Meghan's actions became disjointed and erratic. She spent hours sitting in her office, staring blankly at an empty computer screen. The pride of someone who had always commanded the media narrative was now replaced by raw terror at the prospect of an unvarnished truth being exposed at any moment. She understood that when the royal family refused to speak, it meant they held something capable of ending her career forever if she dared cross the red line again. But the greatest tragedy was not professional. It unfolded within the walls of their own home. Harry, once her most loyal shield, began to notice the anomalies in his wife's silence. He no longer saw a Meghan blazing with righteous fury. He saw only a woman scrambling to cover her tracks. Fragments from Anne's investigation, never officially released, somehow seeped into Harry's awareness through documents delivered to him in utter quiet. The way Harry looked at Meghan now held no more blind adoration. Instead, there was a chilling emptiness. He began to recognize the artifice in the tears that once melted his heart, the calculation behind the campaigns he had once believed were fought for freedom. The single thread that had bound him to their life in America, his faith in her, snapped completely. The betrayal he had felt from the family he once trusted paled beside the realization that the person he loved most had regarded him merely as a tool in her power game. Harry stood there in the opulent room, utterly alone, watching his trembling wife confronted by invisible pressures, and, for the first time, he did not reach out to take her hand. On the front pages, the public began to buzz about Meghan's sudden disappearance from the news cycle. No more sharp declarations, no more veiled hints at dark truths. Speculation swirled about undisclosed, drastic measures that had finally been deployed. But the truth was simpler and more devastating. The most powerful measure of all was reality itself. The war Meghan had ignited did not end in an explosion. It ended in absolute, deafening silence. In London, Princess Anne closed the final dossier. She sought no applause. Her victory resided precisely in this stillness. Meghan had chosen silence to preserve whatever scraps remained of her position, and Harry had chosen silence because his belief had turned to ash. The shadow of calculation receded, leaving behind a hauntingly open ending about the true cost of betrayal and the quiet, unshakable strength of a monarchy that needed no words to reaffirm its place.